we're going to be doing is we're going to be pouring an epoxy resin. So this particular epoxy resin we have right here is liquid glass. So this can pour as heavy as 2 to 4 inches thick. Pour is going to be about 3/4 of an inch thick, but we still want something that pours a little bit thicker. So you want to make sure that whatever product you get can pour for that thickness that you're doing. Some are just meant for a top layer. I measured out all these previously, and what I do is I use measuring cups. So I'm doing a 2-to-1 ratio. So that means that the resin itself, I do 2 parts to 1 part of the catalyst. So I'm just going to add the catalyst to it. Okay, it's very, very fluid, so it comes out quick. This particular brand, what they do is, as long as you keep all your caps in the right area, they do the resin with a white cap, they do the catalyst with a black cap, so you're able to separate them. Now the reason that I have all these different cups poured out, I'm not doing one big one, is one, I want to be able to mix different colors for the particular project that I'm doing. But also the second thing is you have to be real careful with how much of this you mix at a time. If you mix more than a gallon at a time in one container, there's a large heat factor. Plus also I'm using something that has a lower VOC, so it's not, you know, as potent when you're smelling it. But if you're using something that's in an enclosed space with a high VOC, you should have a mask on. I have a large door open, I'm getting good airflow, so I'm making sure that everything's good on that. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to mix color in to each one of these. I'm using powdered color. So the product that I'm using is a mica powder. So it's a Roleo pigment, and you can take colors and you can mix them up and everything like that. I'm mixing these separate so that I could do different colors, and when I do a pour, I can kind of have it dive in. I like using mica powder over liquid because I find that powder mixes better. So for example, I'm going to take just a little bit of this powder, okay, and I'm going to put it in here. And I mean, we're talking a very small amount. You always want to make sure that you have kind of an area set up for that. You can use a mixing stick, whatever you want to use. I got these mixers so that I'm able to kind of just get a quicker result of getting this mixed together, okay? You want to make sure you're not flying with this on the mixer, but this also gives you a really nice mix, okay? And then you make sure that you have an area that you can kind of keep this over. I just let it drip over the cup or let it drip straight into this. But the key is you really don't want to get any dust or anything on that. Okay, so that's going to be the mixer that I will use for this particular color. Now the way that this color mixes up, okay, it's got like a nice pinkish type tone to it, but I want to add a little bit of a sparkle to it. So I'm going to mix in, it's a pearl, okay? So if you've ever done anything with car paint or you've seen like a pearl finish on cars, this adds a little bit of a luster to it, okay? And if you kind of see when I'm mixing it, you can see that pearl pushing around in there. It's a big way to be able to change the color on there and be able to have something that kind of pops a little bit more, all right? Now, then if I go into another color, like I'm gonna be doing a blue. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna eventually mix a certain amount of, I'm calling it like a plumberry color, and then a certain amount of blue. Again, if you notice this blue, it's bright, but it's not real shiny. Again, it doesn't have that pearl type look. So I'll mix the blue in, okay? And I don't like to cross-contaminate with these, so I'll take that one, set it aside. I'll use a new mixer for this particular color, and then I'll come in here, and again, start it out slow, you know, just like you're mixing in the kitchen, otherwise you're gonna throw everything everywhere, okay? But since I'm using this mixture, you can see how blue that got right away, okay? But again, I want to do something that has a little bit of a pop with the pearl. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add that pearl to it again. You don't need much, okay? I just add that on the top and then put my mixer back in. And you can see as that's mixing how it's got that different color to it. It's a much more rich blue, and that's what we want to achieve over here, okay? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go and I'm going to mix the other colors that I have. The drying time on this, you've got a lot of workability time, so you don't need to be rushing to do it as long as you have everything prepped. And you want to make sure that you have everything laid out beforehand, making sure that your color is laid out, you have your mixing paddles, you have everything you need that on your catalyst and your resin, but you also want to make sure that you have good measuring cups. Things that are disposable, you can try to pull the mixture out of the cup after it dries. Really not worth it, and you can get a cross contamination on it, so you want something that you can just dispose of and recycle. So I'll get all these mixed up. Once I do, the next video you'll see is the pour that we're going to make. Like a plastic tube or something that you can feed the lights through. So if the lights go out at some point, then you can simply pull that out through that tube, and then you can install new lights. The problem that we have here is this logo is very curvy and intricate, and it didn't really lend that option. So this particular application is not going to be lit up all the time, so we're hoping we'll get a really long life out of it. But either way, we're still using logo colors that go with this, and it's still going to have a bright look, but we couldn't do the tube option as we were going through. So in a previous video, we showed how we were mixing up these colors, and it's a 2-to-1 ratio, and we get this workability time with everything. So it's going to take overnight for this to dry, so we have plenty of time to be able to get this in. But one of the things is you want to be able to start pouring, because you don't want your pigment and everything to kind of separate out a little bit. You want to make sure that everything is mixed really well. This is something where we chose to mix up 4 different colors, and we're going to kind of go through here and experiment with pouring out and trying to see like what it would be like to be able to kind of marry these colors up a little bit so that it's not just one big solid piece. As you pour the colors in, okay, so as I take this and say I try to go and pour in one of these fingers, okay, as you're doing that, okay, you want to make sure that you don't over pour, okay? And you want to try to eliminate as much over pour as possible going on the wood, because that's just more that you have to sand off or take care of in that regard, okay? You can see how it's kind of wanting to rush and separate down. So now if I take a blue and I pour it into that, right? And we go down and we start kind of playing with it. This is the hopes that as we're doing this, right, it's going to mix together like you're seeing right here, so you get that push of it. So then I come back down with our plumberry look. And the nice part about this particular epoxy that we're using is it pours really easy. So it's very fluid, and it's going to seek out its level, okay? I don't want to confuse that with you thinking that it's completely self-leveling. It's not, okay? So if you do not have a level surface, and our surface is not completely level, okay, it is going to get high and low spots, and you have to take that into consideration when you're doing your pour, all right? So as we're doing this, I want to get it as high up as possible, and obviously make sure you're wearing gloves while you're doing it, like plastic gloves or rubber gloves, so it doesn't stick to the adhesive, okay? But we want this to be very, very uniform and unique as we're going. So you want to make sure, especially when you're mixing multiple colors, that you're really being conscious of how you're mixing those colors. The particular logo has little bits of gray into it, so we're going to start pushing that in to take away from some of the brightness of this, to try to knock it down just a little bit so that we can tame some of the colors. So if you see that, we're getting more of a deeper color with it. Again, it's a process. So I'm gonna keep pouring this thing around and figuring out what the best color consistency is and how it should be. The nice part is when you're mixing these multiple colors, you have the chance where if you don't like the way that something is kind of coming together, you can change that color. Okay, you could go mix a different color, you could kind of push it in. That's going to cause you to get a little bit of an overflow, but that's okay in that regard if you're trying to achieve a certain color. So in the next video that we have, we'll show what it's like when it's all poured in.